Picture this, you're juggling multiple prescriptions, patient consultations, and endless hours of administrative tasks, all while maintaining a happy work-life balance. It's chaotic, it's stressful, and it's downright exhausting. Or maybe you're a student who's overwhelmed by all your assignments, exams, OSCEs, whilst attending hours and hours of lectures and labs and maintaining an active social life. What if I told you there's a way to streamline your week and reclaim a sense of control over your time? I think I can kickstart that journey. I've created a free PDF guide, 5 steps to streamline your week and add 5 hours to your schedule. In this guide, you'll learn how to optimize your workflow, prioritize your tasks, and carve out precious time for self-care and personal pursuits. Click the link below to grab the guide now. I promise you your future self will thank you for it. Hey, my name is Anisha Patel and I'm obsessed with all things career development. Whether that's navigating through your professional journey, gaining more clarity, identifying your passions, or gaining the confidence to chase your dreams, I'm here to support you to craft a roadmap to success. I am a pharmacist turned entrepreneur who's transformed my passions into purpose. I've grown a podcast that has reached thousands of people across the globe. I'm building an online business, and I've left my 9-to-5 to chase my dreams and build a career that I love. I've walked this path of transformation myself, and now I'm here to share insights, strategies, and stories to help you carve out a career that you love. Career opportunities, personal development, challenges, growth, and building life skills are all things we discuss on this podcast. Whether you're sipping a cup of coffee, taking a walk, or driving in the car, be prepared to be inspired and motivated to step outside of your comfort zone. This is the Pharmacist Diaries podcast.
Cathrine, welcome to Pharmacist Diaries, first of all.
Thank you very much for asking me.
Absolutely.
It's an honour. It's a great honour.
Yeah, thank you. I am so pleased that actually it was Gillian Murray, a good friend of mine, who made the recommendation to ask you to come onto the podcast.
She's a good friend of mine as well, actually.
Excellent. Fantastic. So she'll be very, very happy to see us having a conversation. She'll be tuning into this episode. So I know I'll have one viewer for sure. But
that's all you need.
Yeah, that's all you need. But as I've looked at your LinkedIn profile, you've obviously sent me information about yourself and your journey. You've got an incredible amount of experience and you are an inspiration for sure in the pharmacy profession. So I feel like this is an honor for me to actually get an opportunity to interview you and hear all about your pharmacy journey, as well as all the details within the critical care space. So I guess let's kickstart the episode by asking you why you decided to become a pharmacist in the first place.
So that's a nice question to start, isn't it? So I guess at school I quite liked chemistry, and then I quite liked biology, and I quite liked biochemistry. And I think my mother had studied chemistry and she'd gone into teaching. She'd gone to university and she said, choose a vocation, choose something you can go back to. And so I chose pharmacy. And I left school at 17 actually and went to university to study pharmacy in Aberdeen, which was about 3 hours away from where I lived in Stirling, and never looked back. Well, something like that.
As a pharmacist, I know firsthand how challenging it can be to maintain our health and well-being whilst caring for others. I am a true believer of making the time to look after my physical, mental, and emotional health, and I love the idea of using natural supplements to support me on this journey. That's why I was so excited to find The Naked Pharmacy. Their products are 100% plant-based and naturally sourced, 100% biodegradable, and it feels really safe to know that they are formulated, tested, and manufactured to the same standard as a pharmaceutical product. However, the most important fact to share is that their CEO and founder, Kevin Levers, is a pharmacist with over 35 years of experience in the pharmaceutical industry. I love that as a community, we can support our pharmacy colleague every time that we purchase a product. As a Pharmacist Diaries listener, you get an exclusive 20% discount off all Naked Pharmacy products using the code PD20. Just visit www.thenakedpharmacy.com and treat yourself to something new.
Amazing. So during your university years, what was your experience in terms of what you enjoyed? What were your passions, and where did you think your pharmacy journey was going to go back then?
No, gosh, that's a good question. So I think I joined it a bit of a rebel. I wasn't that. I was sort of thinking I should study something more, but I wasn't a really diligent student. But I think by the end, I really loved it. I loved the science particularly, and the things that really sparked me were, so don't forget in those days, because it's quite some time ago, a lot of pharmacy was science. There was a lot of pharmaceutical chemistry, which was pretty heavy. It was, interesting. It was heavy, but we had about 3 or 4 ward rounds. I mean, that's incredible, isn't it? Through the whole 4 years. But they were the things that really sparked me. Going to see patients, definitely. And going to, join the multidisciplinary team. I loved that. And I thought, and this was just the sort of, it wasn't the start of clinical pharmacy, not quite that old, but it was in the early days. And I thought, yeah, I want to be a clinical pharmacist. That's it. I want to see patients. I want to, be part of the multidisciplinary team. That was very strong.
Amazing. Yeah. I definitely had a very similar experience in terms of my journey within pharmacy. I was really intrigued by industry, but I didn't quite think I had the discipline for it. And I also loved so much being in front of the patient.
Yes.
And the patient education aspect was a big part of my joy. And working in a community pharmacy throughout university helped me to understand how much I enjoyed the community side of building rapport with patients, helping them in their health journey, helping to solve a problem. And I just enjoyed the conversation, and it helps me to realize why I do this podcast as well today, because it's all about conversation and connection and network and making friendships. And it's, instead of with patients, I'm with pharmacists, but those skills and the passion is still the same. And that definitely shone through during my degree. And I'm always saying to students when I'm teaching now is that whilst you're in university, try to hone in on those areas where you feel lit up by the person who's teaching you, or the content that you're learning, or when you're studying, you can't stop reading, or you're in the lab and you never want to leave. What is it that brings you joy? Because that will help to navigate where you go in your pharmacy career, because a lot of students now struggle with the amount of choice that we have and the opportunities that are available.
Yes, I can imagine that. I mean, certainly there wasn't, I can't complain. I think I've had a wonderful career, but there certainly wasn't the same opportunities. There wasn't GP pharmacy practice, which I think would have appealed. And there was, the community setting was really quite different. But I really think all of these areas, I've always thought that it's what you make of it. It can be as good as bad as you want it to be. And but the connection with patients, and actually being part of a team, the multidisciplinary team, I've always really enjoyed. Muscling in and getting your voice heard. Conveying what you think is best for your patient is always great, actually. I really do love that.
Yeah.
I love it, actually.
Absolutely. Advocating for the patient, and also it's a really good learning opportunity when you're working in a multidisciplinary environment, especially in the early days. As a Band 6 pharmacist, when I did my residency, it was such a privilege to be part of the MDT and get your opinion across and get your voice heard. But also when you're on those ward rounds, you learn so much from the doctors, the nurses, the physiotherapists that you're listening to in terms of the patient journey and how they support. And it makes you such a, better practitioner as a pharmacist.
Oh, it definitely does. Definitely does. And there's nothing, it's really satisfying helping patients. Whether it's just a little thing like helping them getting a discharged medication a bit quicker, or sorting out something for them, or just, I do a lot of work weaning sedatives and opioids after long-term, talking to the patient and their family about their, long-term pain and things. I do. I like all that. I love all that.
Amazing. So I guess that's helped me to understand where your interest sparked from.
Yes.
And when you qualified as a pharmacist, what was the start of your journey like for you?
So I qualified as a pharmacist. I think I had two interviews that I really remember. There was one at Guy's and there was one at St Thomas's. Now, don't forget, I came from Aberdeen, which is like Gotham City in the north, grey, you know, beautiful granite city, but completely different. And I came down to St Thomas's, which you've worked at for many years, and I walked over Westminster Bridge and I just thought, this is where I'm going to work. I want to work here. I just fell in love. I fell in love with the setting. I loved London. And I went in and actually it's a terrible days. My pre-registration interview was in the CD room. And one of them, I think, I just had a cigarette. I mean, that's how long ago. People still smoked in pharmacy. But it was just such a wonderful setting. I loved it. And then I went over to interview Guys, and that was great as well. I loved Guys, but they were a bit more formal at Guys. You know, they asked me things I remember, like, what's the difference between clinical pharmacy and ward pharmacy? And I was like, well, I don't know. I think you might tell me that. So anyway, very lucky I got the job at St Thomas's. It wasn't even Guy's and St Thomas's in those days. And well, I'll never look back. Well, you always have ups and downs in your journey, didn't you? But I loved working there. Actually, I loved working in central London. At that time, it was so different from everything I'd experienced before. You know, my background was very Scottish. And you come down to London, I loved the anonymity. I loved this sort of cultural diversity. And being part of this really big team in a big London teaching hospital was really great fun. Very privileged to be there, particularly in the early days.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. There is so much opportunity when you go into a big teaching hospital. I went to Oxford and absolutely loved the big site, the opportunities, the different ward specialties, and the team within the pharmacy department was huge, even, 10 years ago. Such a massive team of pharmacists, technicians, procurement, management, IT, all of it. It's a really great opportunity for you to start your career and understand where you fit in to the bigger network.
Yes, absolutely.
But also it's a really good opportunity for you to see all the different specialties when you go to these huge teaching hospitals, because they are a specialist centre for so many different types of conditions, and that allows you an opportunity to learn about those clinical conditions in so much more depth than you would in a potentially smaller hospital or a district general as well.
Yes, I completely agree. I love the hospital setting, and seeing, as you say, all these different specialities. And these, I mean, at that time, St Thomas's was very much a sort of public school hospital. But it's not anymore at all. But this is, I've got to sound like I'm ancient, but I feel I'm quite old. But it was very much then. It was just very different, but very, very welcoming, I have to say. And going up and sort of feeling, you're the first pharmacist in a particular area, which was great, actually. Making a difference to the team and to the patient was really satisfying.
Mm. And in terms of the actual pre-reg year, what was it like? Was it still the same sort of, you go to different rotations every few weeks, whether it's dispensary and the ward, and how is it different?
Oh my
today?
God, it was today. I remember the diary. I didn't even complete it. I mean, it's so much less form, of course, There was rotations, I think, every 6 weeks, but some of them were great. Like, I don't think there was even a clinical rotation. There was dispensary, of course. Stores where we just essentially sat around a lot of the day and helped the chief pharmacist do his orders, which he signed every day. And then manufacturing was huge. We used to manufacture everything then, from the disinfectant that the cleaners cleaned the wards to every type of oral solution that the patient was taking. So there's a lot of manufacturing. We used to even make those powders in the little, square things. I was terrible at that. I could never get them to do it properly. Anyway, but no. It was great. Lots and lots of manufacturing, lots of aseptic dispensing, lots of injectable solutions being made on site, actually. There was a big clean room. I think there still is, but at that time, we manufactured most things, like adrenaline. We used to manufacture adrenaline, 1 in 1,000, 1 in 10,000. And you got to learn how to ampoule seal and all these things that feel like a long time ago. But it was great. It was good fun. It really was good fun. And the thing is, I think the other nice thing, I mean, every pre-reg experience is great, but the nice thing about the big teaching hospitals is there's a whole group of you, you know. I think there was about 15 of us pre-registration pharmacists. So you really become the team, don't you? You know, and in fact, there were a couple of them that went into industry. You're right, at that time I wasn't really tempted, but you got to know this team. And so suddenly you had like 20 friends, 15, 20 friends, and they had a network within pharmacy, the wider thing. So it was great. It was a really good opportunity. I mean, of course, it had its negative points, but that's life, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. I loved the hospital environment, and that's one of the reasons why I chose hospital to start my training year, because you're set up in terms of a community.
Yes.
And I was at Papworth for my pre-registration year, so it was me and one other pre-reg.
Cool.
But they helped us to join up with Adam Brooks in terms of the teaching sessions. So we made a lot of friends within Cambridge, and we were meeting up for residentials, which we would stay in Cambridge for an entire week.
Cool.
I think 3 times within the year. So it was a really nice opportunity to make friends and network within the pharmacy space, especially with other trainees who are going through a similar experience to you. So that was really nice. And I love at Guy's and St Thomas's now, I mean, there's around 20 training pharmacists, some of which are there for the full kind of Guy's and St Thomas's experience. Some of them do 6 months in pediatrics at the Evelina and then 6 months around adults. Yeah, so there's now opportunities for a half. And now they've also added in rotations where you go out to GP practices and community pharmacies as well. So it's a really, really wonderful opportunity to see so much that pharmacy has to offer so that you can make the best decision about the start of your career and you kickstart it in the right way for yourself. But it's also a really good opportunity to see what secondary care has to offer and also the link between that and primary care as well. So
yes, absolutely. And I think it was rather sad that we didn't get that. But that, you know, I did do a few locum shifts once I qualified. But we didn't really get that link. But you're absolutely right. They get a great training opportunity now. And I think,
absolutely.
I mean, at that time, I think we were sort of counted as probably the same as you, much more as part of the workforce, you know. And you got a bit of training, but you were there to essentially dispense a lot of the time. But you learned through doing that. Whereas I think now, quite right, the training posts are considered to be so supernumerary, you know, and they have much better structured program. But I can't complain. Thankfully, we didn't have an exam at the end, so that made it slightly easier for me.
What a bonus!
I know, absolutely. I can't even remember when that came in. Did you have the exam?
I did have the exam, yeah. And even now it's January. I know that the trainees start getting a little bit sort of anxious
right?
because they're halfway through now. And they will start kind of really sort of picking up their study time outside of working life so they can prepare for the exam. So around sort of January, February time, the anxiety levels start raising because they know 2024, like this is the year I become a pharmacist and I need to step up in terms of studying outside of work and making sure that I am ready for the exam and the calculations. So it's an exciting journey for them, but some of them do get a little bit nervous at this time of year.
Yeah, I think what you're saying actually sort of, you know, almost concurs that the exam's important because they study more when you know you've got an exam. And I presume there was some research done at the time. So I think it probably is the right thing to do, but I'm rather glad I didn't have to do it.
No one likes an examination if they don't have to do it.
No, I know.
But yeah, it's really, it's obviously it's a good way to kind of ensure that you know you're ready to kind of step into this professional role, and it sets you apart from people who aren't quite ready and need that further guidance or the extra sort of 6 months of training to make sure that they're safe and confident and able to do the job appropriately.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess from your side of the story, in terms of your journey, once you had qualified as a pharmacist, what were your thought processes in terms of the role that you wanted to undertake and where your vision was as to what you wanted to do with your career?
Oh gosh, so I'm not sure that I had a full vision at that time, but I knew that I wanted to see patients, and I knew that I wanted to be a clinical
Yeah.
pharmacist for sure. I think actually when I qualified, there was quite a lot of shortages. We were called basic grade pharmacists at the time. It was even before, what was it called? Whitley, C grades, B grades. And I stayed in London for 2 years, did some dispensary work, and then joined the clinical rotations. At that time, it was all the early HIV stuff, And the guys in St Thomas's had a huge cohort of. It wasn't even guys in St Thomas's. I should correct myself. It was St Thomas's at that time. Had a huge cohort of HIV patients. So I spent a lot of time in the medical wards. They had quite, complicated drug therapies. And a lot of what I was doing was a mixture of clinical review, and actually I set up their first cytotoxic reconstitution. So they were still doing chemo on the wards. And we got a vertical laminar flow cabinet and we started up doing chemotherapy. So my involvement in those patients was due, the post sarcoma, of course, the only treatment at that time was chemotherapy. So preparing chemotherapy, giving it to, the multidisciplinary team. And in fact, I was veering towards oncology because there was, the cytotoxic reconstitution was such a new thing and there was lots of opportunities for pharmacy in it. So I thought I was going to do oncology, I must admit. And I thought I was going to do that for a long time. And actually, I was in Australia after I was at St Thomas's for 3 years, I got offered a job in Australia, setting up a cytotoxic reconstitution service in a hospital in the western suburbs of Sydney. And that was great fun. I mean, I had a 3-year sabbatical, I think. I did a lot of work, but a lot of having fun as well. In fact, there used to be a phone in the pharmacy. They used to call it Cathrine McKenzie's phone because I used to be on it so much, just talking to friends and having a great time. But anyway, after doing that there for another 2 years, it was just too depressing. I found it. Now it's completely different now, and it's really, really nice to see. So at that time, well, HIV was definitely a death sentence. There was nothing, and oncology was very much the same. There were some things like there was CHOP for Hodgkin's lymphoma, which had quite a good survival rate, but young patients with cancer, which we had a lot of in Australia, died. And don't forget, we didn't have, even some of the extended spectrum antimicrobials at that time. So they die of neutropenic sepsis sometimes. So I decided it was just, I couldn't do a whole career in it. I thought it was going to be too depressing. Little did I know about all the advances that were going to come along the way, and how it would be a sort of clinical trial and research sort of super arena, wouldn't it? But at that time, so I came back and went to Edinburgh for a year, and that was great fun. I did oncology again then, hematology oncology. Again, I loved it, but don't forget this was central Scotland. And it was a area even though Edinburgh's a very wealthy area now, and it was reasonably wealthy then, there was a lot of deprivation, a lot of young men, particularly dying of cancer. So I decided that I would come back to London, and I wanted to do intensive care. I knew David Treacher. In fact, he was the clinical director of ICU. And I came back down, I did parenteral nutrition with him and then started in intensive care. That's quite a long soliloquy of what happened, wasn't it? I jumped far too far, probably.
No, I love that. I love it when you tell it, it's your thought processes coming out and your memory of what happened. But I guess I'm intrigued a little bit, first of all, about what was it like as a young, I guess you were in your early 20s or mid 20s, moving to another country. What were your thought processes then in terms of moving? I guess you moved from Scotland to London, so you knew that you were okay in terms of independence and managing without family members and making new friends and connections. But then what was it like to just, I guess, move across the world at that age on your own?
Oh, I think for me, actually, it was the making of me. I do remember a couple of times being somewhere like on a country farm miles away in Australia, just thinking, this is me. I've got here, and I've got here because people like me, they respect me, and I'm here as an individual. I'm not here because I'm either whatever descendant of a person, but you're your own independent person. Gave me an awful lot of confidence, I must admit. In fact, my oldest daughter is at New York at the moment. She's in New York University, and I think she's experiencing the same thing. That sort of like, all right, I've got to go out here and I've got to make it. And there's no one I can go back to. I've got to make it on my own. So for me, it was great. It was a really, really positive experience. I loved it. I probably did too much partying and not enough scholastic stuff. But, I was in my 20s. I was young. I was single.
Of course, you're
Yeah.
supposed to be enjoying yourself,
Yeah,
for sure. Not
absolutely.
everything is about pharmacy in life. It sometimes feels like that way, but of course in your 20s, for sure you should be enjoying yourself and living your best life because you can.
Having a career in pharmacy can at times feel like an uphill battle. The constant demands, the pressures, and finishing each day like your to-do list was just as large as it was in the morning. It may leave you questioning if there's more to your professional journey. It's a question that I confront regularly, but one that drives me to make positive changes towards a better working life. Daily and weekly reflection exercises has really helped me to understand my approach to working life, what improvements I can make, and what strategies I can use to turn those draining pressures into opportunities for growth. Let's take a moment to reflect on your professional journey and how you approach your goals. What's working well for you, and where do you see areas for improvement? I have seen success with time blocking, weekly meetings with my husband to synchronize schedules, and task batching. These 3 strategies alone have been game changers towards my productivity and efficiency. If this resonates with you and you'd like to explore this even deeper, immerse yourself in my new quiz, What's Holding You Back from Achieving Your Professional Goals? You will discover one specific area to focus on, and hopefully this will kickstart your journey towards a more rewarding career. It only takes 60 seconds to complete, and the link is below. Let me know how you get on.
I've only realised now, becoming a parent of 2, how hard it is to do simple things that would be easy for a single person to just make that decision and just go and do it spontaneously. Now there's a lot of thought process that goes into everything that we have to do as parents. And I guess I knew that would be the case, but you don't realize the reality of that until you have a child, and the challenges around childcare or going away for the weekend or even going out for dinner with my husband. Like, we don't have that much support in terms of childcare at the moment. My parents are away, traveling themselves. So at the moment, we're kind of, winter months, we take a back seat, but as soon as they're back, we rely on them quite a lot more.
And they're really good. They help you a lot, Anisha.
Oh, they're amazing. They're wonderful. And they help me so much in terms of parenting, and my kids adore them. So I am very fortunate and grateful that they are playing a huge part in my children's lives and mine. And we do have a lot of fun, and they're literally 10 minutes down the road, which makes it even more enjoyable for us to see each other. Wonderful. Yeah, it's really good. And when my grandma was alive, she died a couple of years ago now. We had 4 generations of girls, 10 minutes from each other, and we'd see each other every few days. There wouldn't be, 2 or 3 days where we wouldn't drive over there and just check in or have a cup of tea or, go for a hug. So, I really appreciate those moments in my life and love that I have family so close by. But when they're not around, I do miss my mum a lot. A, for the company, because I get on with her so well, but also with the support is so valuable to me and my husband. And for the kids, they love it as well. So, we are missing them. And when we lived in Dubai and Abu Dhabi, and I had Liliana, and she was my first child, my initial thoughts of living abroad, kind of the reasoning behind moving back home was for her and missing, that family connection. So I loved living outside of the UK. I lived in the US for 9 years as well, as a teenager.
Oh,
My
did you?
parents moved out there, so obviously,
If I
so I went to high school, so I didn't do GCSEs or A levels. I went to
yes.
high school in Virginia, finished high school, and then started university, or what they call as college. So I did 4 years biology and chemistry, and then I moved back home to do pharmacy. So I completely resonate with you when you say how much joy and kind of how that experience of living abroad made you who you are in some ways,
Yeah.
and kind of started your journey in pharmacy, but also started that kind of confidence and being assertive and being independent. A lot of that resonates with me because I've had this international work experience and living in other countries, which I've been very kind of fortunate to be able to do. And I'm always encouraging young people to step out their comfort zone and do something different and see things outside of the NHS as well, and
Yes.
what we have to offer in the UK.
Totally.
Right?
Totally. I mean, I think
And
now is.
I guess that,
Sorry, I was going to say this. The training is much more structured than it was, but it's still possible if you want to do something. And
absolutely. I've like last year I did I had reached out to an Australian recruitment company, and they're looking to support UK pharmacists to move over to Australia because there's a huge shortage at the moment within the pharmacy profession.
Is there really?
So we did an episode, so we did a podcast episode talking about the recruitment process, how you get licensed, the exam that you have to do, and the job kind of opportunities.
Yes.
And there is definitely a lot available for community pharmacists, for hospital pharmacists. They're starting the kind of GP practice pilots, industries and options. So it's really exciting to be a pharmacist now because I think there are a lot of opportunities, and it's just a small hurdle of doing a couple of exams. And I think as a young early careers pharmacist, because you've recently taken that exam, or you're in your clinical diploma, or you're in a rotational job and you haven't specialized yet, that exam is going to be so easy for you. But now if I was to take it, obviously I'm in pediatrics and I would definitely have to study for it. I would definitely have to go back and look at the adult content, maybe pick up on some of the pharmacology content that I might not be using on a day-to-day basis. So I'm always saying to the younger generation that this is a perfect opportunity to get that license because it's going to be so easy for you in comparison to when you're 10, 15 years qualified, you've got that family and you've got to think about multiple other people before you can make a decision to move countries. It's not that it's not possible for us. It's just a little bit harder in terms of overcoming obstacles, answering those questions, looking for schools and good districts, all of those kind of things. So it's really nice to hear kind of about that opportunity. And I don't think maybe you haven't thought about it, but isn't it so interesting that you obviously had this experience in the field of cancer at St. Thomas's and Guy's, and an organization found you, and you're an early careers pharmacist at this point in your career, and someone found you and said, hey, I can see what you're doing. I can see your worth. I can see your value. I can see the hard work and the dedication that you're putting into this specialist area. Come and help us to learn. Now, if you look at that story several years later, it would be unlikely that a band 6 pharmacist would be found, right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. It would be really unlikely.
And that's so cool. That is an amazing part of your story. And I don't know if you've thought about that before, but that is really exciting to have been poached for a job to support building a system or a process, or the way that you reconstitute medications in the UK, and bringing those skills and that experience to another country, to another organization, to another hospital. And I just think highlighting that is really important in this episode, because you talked about it like, yeah, cool, I went to Australia. It was just what I did, but it's so huge.
Well, I must admit, at the time, I I approached it with some trepidation. It was not an easy decision to make, and I was very nervous about it. And actually, when you first get there, it takes a long time. You probably knew that from going to the US. But it was an incredible experience. It really did define me. Particularly, I went for about a year and a half, and then I came home for 4 months. I did a locum at St Thomas's, actually. Tony West was the chief by then, and he's always remained a good friend and mentor throughout my career. He gave me a locum, and then I went back. And when I went back, I never looked back. I had a great year and a bit. And in fact, I got residency. I did think about staying. I think, like you, it was the thought of, my mother was a widow by then. The thought of seeing my family a finite number of times was very difficult, and the thought of never knowing anyone.
It's tough, isn't it?
It is tough, isn't it? And I used to think, I don't know anyone here who knows me when I was a child or knows me, and a lot of the people I met, not all of them, but a lot of them had come from, they had come on these £10 assisted ships and things where it really was the new world for them. And actually, my life in the UK really wasn't that bad. I just wanted another adventure, I mean, like you had a profession. I knew I could get a job if I came back. So I came back, and I was going to go back again. But then I met my husband, and that's another story. But anyway, no, I did absolutely love it. It was a great time. And I still have, in fact, my best friend was a girl that I knew before Australia, but we lived together in Australia, and she lives very close to me here in Hampshire. And yeah, it was a great time. I have really, really good friends still from that time, because it was really good fun. And I loved the Australian sense of humour. They were really, really funny. They're very self-deprecating, just like the British. So it was good fun. And
amazing.
It's great, yeah.
Oh, great. Now, that sounds like a really, an enjoyable opportunity and a good memory for you, for sure. I guess I'll take you back to something else that I was thinking about with your story in oncology, is that you talked about how sort of depressing it was and how challenging it was emotionally to be in front of the type of patients that you were seeing day to day. And university, and I guess in your early 20s, no one prepares you for that side of patient care.
So agree. I mean, now I think to myself, and I say to my juniors, no matter how bad that experience is for you, it's worse for the patient. And that really helps me. So now I will talk to any patient, no matter what situation they're in. It's deeply sedated and ventilated. I mean, I might not try, but, I do talk to patients. But at that time, no one prepares you. And I think it's a real failing of our profession. I hope they're getting better at it. You'll see more early years pharmacists than I do. I really hope they're getting better at it. Because
I don't know if they are. I think obviously because in the last couple of years, the idea of mental health in general has become a big part of our lives.
Yes.
Outside of pharmacy. So people's awareness of anxiety or emotional health, your mental health, what might impact you that's different to somebody else, and how we are all different, and how we will all experience a different emotion depending on the situation, and how we navigate through that is really important. So I think that awareness exists, but I wouldn't say that there are any processes or specific systems to support you, and especially for early careers pharmacists, because when you look at students, so I'm obviously lecturing at King's College London.
Yes.
A lot of our students are going into hospital environments. We make it very clear to the supervisors before these students arrive, like, don't forget, remind yourself when you're with these students that these students have never, or very unlikely have ever been exposed to someone who's this unwell.
Yes.
So when they see an unwell patient, at that point, they're not even speaking to the patient or supporting them on their journey. In their first year, they've got a half day at Guy's St Thomas's Hospital to just see what pharmacy professionals do. And because we are so used to going onto a ward and seeing sick people, and it's just part and parcel of our journey. And in pediatrics, you're seeing sick children.
And parents.
When you have students, you have to remember you know, that they don't have this experience yet. But I wouldn't say that we have understood how this impacts students and support them on that journey yet. And the reason why I say that as well is because I work in palliative care in peds.
Yes.
So when I started working in palliative care, I have a lovely team of women. We're an all-female team by chance. And when I went to a hospice for the first time, and watched a compassionate extubation as part of my IP prescribing course. I wanted to follow the patient journey from hospital to the hospice and to the end of life. Being part of that experience was completely new for me, and to see the parents and experience what their journey was like was really challenging. And in that moment, after that experience happened, we had a debrief, and actually my team said, do you want a debrief? Would you like to have a discussion about what you've been through and what you've seen and what you've experienced? Because they're well aware that actually I was new to seeing this and how it would impact me, and they wanted to support my journey. But that was just an individual people being kind and individual people understanding who I am. And they know that, like, I'm a new parent. And at that time, I went there, I was pregnant with my second child. So, of course, like, they were just concerned that, hey, are your emotions heightened? Do we need to support you? And though I was fine, I can truly appreciate where you're coming from with regards to your journey and feeling like you're surrounded by a lot of sort of negativity and depressing situations and a lot of sadness, and how that can impact your day-to-day life.
Yes.
And it's just something I thought would be important for us to raise on the podcast, because it is tough to be a healthcare professional. You're seeing a lot, and to manage those emotions can be quite difficult.
Yes, absolutely. I must admit, I mean, it doesn't very often get to me anymore. Usually now, and I say to my juniors when I go into the ICU, I just think of what can I do to make the situation a bit better for the family or for the patient or for the health professional. But there are times, I mean, round about Christmas this time, our neuro ICU had a lot of trauma patients, and that was very difficult. I did get quite emotional. That's unusual for me. It has to be said. But there are times when it is tough, and I think we as a profession are not good at talking about it. Perhaps it's something we can work on together, you know. But it is something we should get.
No, this is really interesting, because it hasn't really come up in conversation for me before. But I do get a lot of people.
Yes.
I get a lot of people asking me why I've chosen palliative care, especially in pediatrics as well, and how I do it as a parent, and how I don't get impacted emotionally. Of course, I get impacted emotionally. It's really tough to see what these parents are going through.
Yes.
But as a professional and as a pharmacist, I really pride myself and put myself in a position where all I want to do is help them have a better experience or journey. Or I see it from the point of view as I'm doing everything I can to improve the quality of life of that child or that baby whilst they're still with us.
Yes, absolutely.
And if I've done that and I've supported that family as much as I can with regards to administering medicines or understanding why they would choose them, or identifying symptoms where they might need to use them at home, or even something as simple as helping them to register their child for their GP practice so they can get repeat medications at home in case that their child does survive for several weeks or months where they need a GP to support them. I've done my job. And if I've done my job, then I feel that reward and I feel that happiness. And even though it's a sad situation, I've done my best, and I feel like I've definitely given that family a good experience of a hospital environment and what their child is going through, and I've supported them on that journey, and that's what keeps me going.
Yes, same with me in those situations. I must admit, very similar. Although, I mean, palliative care children I can imagine, maybe particularly challenging. But it's not dissociate yourself from the setting, because you feel the emotions, but you almost put yourself it's almost like you're sort of slightly in the third person, but you're saying, what can I do to make this situation better for you? This is not my family, but this is what I'm going to do to give to your family. So it's really very rewarding. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do love it. And I think that the community within the palliative care specialty is lovely.
No.
Everyone's very active in terms of trying to support the patient or improving the patient journey or looking at how we can improve guidelines or formulary or unlicensed medicines in order to, improve patient care. So I do love that aspect of it. And even at the conferences, it's so nice.
I bet
it's so
it is,
nice.
guys. I bet they're lovely. In fact, I work with 2 palliative care consultants. One I'm doing research with, and the other one we're writing a paper together. And they're lovely, really lovely people, actually. And we're a good pact, really, aren't we? Pharmacy and palliative care. I mean, we're all sort of on the same team, really. There's a lot of symptom control, isn't there? A lot of things.
Yeah.
In fact, I learn a lot from them. I think they're very good about putting things into context. You know, I think we're naturally, as a profession, cautious. But sometimes we can be a bit overcautious, and I think they put it into clinical context a lot, which is very helpful.
Yeah. So let me take you back to going into critical care.
Yes.
Like, this is a big part of your journey as a pharmacist. And, I'm sure a lot of people who are watching or listening to this episode really want us to dive into that topic. So I guess tell us a little bit about where it started in terms of that first job that you had in critical care and how things developed for you as a pharmacist.
So my first job was, funny enough, chaos surprise, at St Thomas's. It was still St Thomas's. I say that because it did merge quite soon after that. And it was on Mead ward. And Mead at that time was the first ICU in the UK. It was a very, very special place. It was run by a professor called Ron Bradley, who died recently, actually got a big obituary in the BMJ and things, and another doctor called David Treacher, who's a very good friend of mine. And so I was employed, and at that time there weren't really funded posts. You know, there was, in any specialty, I mean, there might have been the odd one. I think there was a bit of, but not really within clinical specialties. So I was given the post for 6 months, and they said, save your salary, and then we'll give you a job. So I dutifully did. In fact, I wrote it up, presented it in Glasgow at the European Society of Intensive Care Medicine, and I think I saved my salary by switching lots of patients from cephalosporins to aminoglycosides. And they still use a lot of aminoglycosides at Guy's and Thomas's. And a lot of patients from Diprivan, at the time, which was very expensive, that was the old propofol, to midazolam. And I actually always say I spent 6 months saving my salary, and I spent the next 7 years proving myself wrong. Because a lot of the patients got over-sedated with midazolam. There wasn't really that much data on the pharmacokinetics at the time. And we switched them, and a lot of patients got over-sedated, and they didn't wake up. ICU patients that are adults are coming with quite a lot of comorbidities, and they might have 1 or 2 opportunities to be ventilated, to be extubated, and we over-sedated them. So I always approach drug costs now with a little bit of caution. I mean, I got my publication out of it, of course. I guess that started that interest in getting published, but I really realised then, in doing that, was one of the things that made me realise that I'm not going to be the clinical pharmacist that stays here for a little while, right? And then the consultant always knows more than me in the medication field. You know, I'm not going to know the same about airways. I'm going to be the clinical pharmacist that stays here and becomes an expert. And there was another situation where I first started, and I remember David said to me, "Oh, Cathy, what do you think about atracurium?" And I kind of thought, what on earth is atracurium? I don't even know what that is. And I still remember going out and getting out of the fridge and thinking, I'm never having this situation again in my career where a consultant knows more about medication than I do in intensive care. So I made a vow. I mean, I haven't kept up with it, but more or less I have, that they're not going to, I'm not having the medics know more about me about the drugs. So, I mean, it's not always the case, but I do still charge myself with it, that they shouldn't, we're the pharmacists, we're the medication experts. We should know as much, if not more than them, and we should support them in deciding. So those 2 things, and I just I think it was a bit like children's, but I just love the integration of science. There still was a lot of science, like, science of acid-base balance, or working at a drug's chemical structure, and whether it was protein bound, whether established whether it being removed by renal replacement therapy. It was all so scientific based that I loved that. I really loved it. And so I knew quite early on that I found my home. Unfortunately, I did save my salary. I saved £10,000 a month. I remember that. And they gave me a job. I think I was the first funded post in the UK at the time. So that's quite some time ago.
No way.
Yeah, I think I was.
That
I
is
think
very
it was
cool.
the first funded post. Although, yeah, I think there was others. I think that Mark Borthwick, he came along quite soon after me, or at the same time. But anyway, there we are. But I did spend the next
Mark
7
Borthwick was
Yes.
one of my role models when I worked in Oxford as a resident pharmacist, and I'm sure he's still there.
Oh, he is still
But
there.
we, everybody, yeah,
He's
he's incredible, and
he is.
I'm always trying to get him to come onto this podcast, but I don't know if he's a little bit shy to share his story. But I will try to convince him again, because he is such a fabulous human being, a wonderful parent, and a great mentor, someone who always encouraged you and guided you, and always, always, always had time for you. You were that resident who, needed to just crack on, but he always had time to educate you. And I won't forget my experience of doing my ICU rotation for the first time with him. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think Mark
It was a great journey.
He's a great friend. We've known each other for years. I suppose our children have grown up together. But, the thing about Mark, that he's just not only is he all these things, but incredibly knowledgeable, clever, kind, but he's also a really good politician. He's a much better politician than me. I throw my toys at my pram far too often, but he really is astute. I think actually, if he didn't love critical care quite as much as he did, he'd be a chief exec, because he's got that, or a real leader. But actually, he's found his niche, and he's fantastic. When we finish, I'll message him and I'll tell him if I've done it, he has to do it, because we're in the process of writing something together. So there we go. He's great.
Yeah,
He's
amazing. I love that. Yeah, no, he is. And it's so lovely that, even in the pharmacy profession, there's so many of us, but it's such a small network. Like here, I'm talking about what feels like could be a random pharmacist who also does critical care. But because within each specialty, people are building such amazing communities, that you're collaborating and you're being innovative, you're doing research together, and you're becoming friends, which is really nice to obviously hear, knowing that you're obviously both in the same specialist area. And I love the story of you starting your critical care journey, and even when you talk, that spark is coming alive. You love the science and the pharmacology, and wanting to be that expert in medicines and being the person that people come to for support and guidance and help with regards to choice, or looking at something that might be unlicensed, or finance, or whatever it might be in terms of the patient journey. And I know that is the case within a lot of specialist areas, but what also comes to my mind as a clinical pharmacist myself is that for young people now, there is so much else that we have to do in our day-to-day job that sometimes it's so challenging for them to get to the point where they feel like they can be that expert, because you have to be so well-rounded now. You've got to be a good leader.
Yeah.
You've got to be good in IT. You've got to understand finance. You've got to educate other people as part of your role, as well as see 50 patients a day.
Yes, I
and
agree. Yeah.
the drug histories, the medicines reconciliation, the interactions, the TTOs. What was it like for you when you were working? Did you have all of these similar issues, or was it different?
I don't think there was as much challenges. I don't think there was as much extra things that you had to do. Do you know what I mean? But I think what there wasn't was So I did the certificate, the postgraduate certificate in pharmacy practice before I left. And then I missed out on the diploma, of course, because I was in Australia having fun. But there wasn't the same structured learning at all. So if you wanted to learn, you had to do it off your own back. And I did teach myself a lot of intensive care medicine in the early days. Just got the Oxford textbook of medicine out and just read.
Okay.
But and I think that was. I mean, that was probably hard. But at the time, you don't know it's hard, do you? You just think that's what you've got to do. I think probably a bit like yourself, I've always had that ability to just look things up. I'm not having someone else tell me the answer. I'd rather look at it myself. So. And that time it was just looking at textbooks, but there was tons around. And actually the unit at that time was, we'd got some really bright medics in doing it was one of these called the Golden Circuit in London at the time. So we got some really fantastic medics in and really great nurses. It was an amazing unit. I mean, people stayed there their whole career. I spent much of my career there actually. But it was a lovely place to work, and I learned so much. They were always learning on ward rounds, and there was grand rounds, and there was this, and there was that. But, I didn't want to be in nothing wrong with the dispensary, don't get me wrong. I just didn't want to do just that. I wanted to do more.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there we are.
Yeah. And you want to dive deep,
Yes,
into a specific
Yes,
area,
I absolutely want to dive deep. I want to understand. What's going on with the patients. And now it's, I want to understand the evidence and how the evidence applies to that patient. At that time, there was a little bit of evidence-based medicine. I mean, of course there was evidence, but it wasn't, I think it sort of came around then, didn't it, to be the be-all and end-all. But it started then, at that time.
Mm. So back then, when you were in this role, I guess when you look at your research journey,
yes.
What sparked your interest in getting that first publication, and then how did things kind of evolve from there?
So I think part of it, and I shouldn't really attribute it to, part of it was I met my husband on the ICU, and he already had a PhD. I think he had a PhD and an MSc. He always had more qualifications earlier. Not that I'm at all competitive, not. And I think he said to me, you just been partying in your old 20s. And I thought, not been to Australia, had a great time. Anyway, so, and then I got the job, and they said to me, you've got to get a higher degree, because I'd not done my diploma. And so I thought, well, I'm not going to do a master's or diploma, I'm going to do a PhD. And I really always like probing clinical questions, having something you see clinically and how can I solve that? And the big thing at that time was solving this oversedation with midazolam, because the textbook said it didn't accumulate in renal failure, but we kept on seeing it. And so I thought, right, I'm going to do a PhD and I'm going to apply to the charity, Guys and Thomas's charity, to try and get some funding. And at that time, they'd never had I don't think they've ever had a non-medic apply, but I just thought, well, don't ask, don't get, I always say that to my juniors now, probably a bit like yourself. So I applied to the charity and I got funding. I was the first non-medical dentist to get funding to do my PhD. And then I started, and started in 1998. I think I published my first paper in 1996. That was one about theophylline. I had quite a few abstracts before then. I already got into the sort of submitting your findings, to a conference. And I think even before I started my PhD, I realised that doing research, and I still say this, makes you a better clinical pharmacist. Understanding the evidence, because if you write a paper, you write in a paper, in the introduction, you put about the literature. You remember what you write in the introduction, and then you do a bit of science in the rest of it. And so it always makes you a better clinical pharmacist. And I really knew that. And so I started my PhD, and then I started in 1998. I had my kids. I had 2 during it, and my third one, I was 37 weeks pregnant. I'm sure that's why they gave me it when I did my Viva. I got my PhD afterwards, and then had a bit of a break. But I published the papers in my PhD just afterwards. And I think it gives you a bit of a dopamine hit, doesn't it? I still get a joy out of publishing all those years later, because it's hard. I say that to pharmacists, it's really hard work. And pharmacy technicians, I'd love to get some more technicians into research. It's hard work. and it's harder than anything else you do because you've got to go through the peer review, then you've got to reply to peer. Therefore, it's really satisfying. I'm sure you agree the same thing. So that was when I started
It's
watching.
it's definitely tough, and I think because there are so many competing responsibilities as a pharmacist, that sometimes research, because you don't necessarily know how to do it from the beginning, especially as a sort of junior pharmacist,
Yes.
it becomes a barrier, or it becomes something that you avoid because it feels like it's a little bit hard. And I would say that when you work in a hospital pharmacy, there are obviously lots of other senior pharmacists who might be doing that research, which you see that happening, but you don't necessarily join them on that journey. Or maybe for some of the younger generation, they're a little bit afraid to ask questions or get involved or say, how can I support you? I want to get involved. This is something that I don't have much experience with, but I want to learn. And it's quite hard. And when you look at even sort of RPS, there's been some focus on supporting pharmacists now to get more involved with research. So they've identified that it is a barrier or a challenge or an obstacle that people are struggling to kind of break through. So I'm hoping that we see a lot more of it. And I think at Guy's and St Thomas's, people are definitely enjoying research. People are getting involved, but that's not the case everywhere. In a big teaching hospital, it's kind of an expectation to some extent. So
yes, I
people
agree.
are doing it, but we still struggle with it.
Yeah,
we still struggle.
We do struggle. And in fact, Casey, over King's, I think is great for pharmacy, for research. It's one of the best places probably in the UK. KCH and Guy's and Thomas's are both great places because they support it. I think the thing is, so I guess maybe I've always compared myself to the medics, perhaps wrongly. And I've always thought, well, if they can do it, I'm going to be able to do it. And I remember, I think asking my husband at some point, when you get a registrar, what do they do? And he said, well, they write up paper. They'll do a review of 6 or 10 patients and then they write it up. And I'm thinking, well, how come they do it and we don't do it? And I think a lot of it is just that block of you think you can't, but it definitely has to come high enough priority in your day. In terms of, if you want to publish, you've got to get up in the morning and say to yourself, I've got to write that paper. I've got to write that paper. Today, we've got a paper that might get accepted in JAMA, which would be amazing. It's just a little letter. It probably won't because it's still under review, so it shouldn't say anymore. But anyway, I get up first and do that because that's the hardest thing of the day. So you do that first. And so I think it's partly getting into a regime and partly it's just opportunity. It is much harder for pharmacists because there's not the career structure there. I think probably in some ways I was lucky in that the career structure wasn't so formed. And so I just thought I want to do a PhD and I'll just go and do it, Whereas now, so I did my PhD, then I did prescribing. Whereas at the moment, it's kind of like, qualify, get your diploma, get your certificate, get a master's perhaps, then do prescribing. I actually think when prescribing comes out as an undergraduate, I think there might be more pharmacists do PhDs. Not that you don't need a PhD to do research, don't get me wrong. Absolutely not. But I think if you're going to make a career out of it, you're always going to come up against people who do have PhDs. So it's going to be it's going to be harder for you. It doesn't mean you can't do it. And the other thing about research is you have to be prepared. I get told off for saying this, but you have to be prepared to give your own time. Not when you write one paper, but if you want to write 10 papers, you've got to give your own time, if you want a career out of it. But then it can become a hobby,
When I was working at the Evelina,
yes,
and I identified that publications and research was one of my weaknesses.
Yes.
I was working in infectious diseases at that time, helping to support a maternity leave contract.
Yes.
And the ID team were incredible, and the medics themselves were doing a lot of publications. And at that point, I just said, oh, can I help? Can I support you? And that was a great stepping stone. Find a friend who's already doing it and knows what they're doing. And Kevin Meesters, who was the doctor that I worked with, he had recently finished his PhD. And when he talked about research, when he talked about publications, he had so much enthusiasm and motivation and passion. So I was like, oh, I've got to hop onto this because this person will be happy to support me. And if I can't get it from pharmacy or someone within the Evelina themselves, then it's okay to go outside. It doesn't really matter as long as you get started on that journey. And then I set myself a goal of, one publication with someone else every year. If you can do that, you're still making strides, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what yeah, that's exactly.
Yeah.
And the same thing I see, if there's no one in pharmacy, just put your hand up and say to the medical profession, because they love, you don't get paid more for, academic genius. We might a little bit, but so they love to talk about their research, so they never say no.
Yeah.
Yeah, good for you. Good for you. That's exactly the right way to do it. It's just to say, I'd like to be part of it. What can I do to help? And there's always something you can do. A pharmacist.
And a lot of the time, it's drug focused.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So you can get data that they cannot get their hands on.
And they love having the support of a different healthcare professional, especially from pharmacy, because they do see you as the medicines expert.
Yes, they do.
And they know that your opinion or your knowledge or your experience or your skill will bring some value to the work that they're also doing. So they really enjoy working alongside you, as well as the fact that you're hoping that they give you the support and the guidance that you need as well on your journey. So it's a nice little kind of two-way friendship there.
Yes. Yeah.
And a great way to start collaborating, developing a network as well within the kind of hospital that you work at. I also think that if you're a pharmacist or a student or a trainee pharmacist listening or watching this episode, that there are other ways for you to collaborate when it comes to research opportunities, and that's becoming a part of a group.
Yes.
Like for you in critical care, there's a great network so that you can develop those friendships, join webinars. There are forums like UKCPA is a great opportunity for a critical care pharmacist to join a group of like-minded specialist pharmacists. So if you don't necessarily want to work with medics to begin with and you really want to start in the pharmacy space, then join groups where there are lots of pharmacists who are doing exciting, inspiring, motivating things. And that kind of brings us to the point of you and kind of what your involvement has been with groups on a national scale within pharmacy.
Oh gosh, well that's quite a big question, isn't it? So I guess so when did it start? About 1998, I think. It was a wee while ago. That's a little while ago. That time, just later than that, Comprehensive Critical Care came out. And that was a big publication in the Department of Health, essentially saying that, critical care should be without walls. And our experience looking after acutely ill patients should be disseminated over the healthcare system. And that was where the concept of the different levels of critical care came out as well. The comprehensive critical care was very medic and nurse-led. But actually, at the end of the publication, he said, we need another group to look at allied health professions and healthcare scientists. So they established a group called the Allied Health Professional Healthcare Scientists. And I was invited as one of the pharmacists. It was myself and John Dade. And this was quite an innovative group. It wasn't me, it was a woman. I can't remember the name of the woman who read it. Something. Anyway, she was really inspirational. She was a physio by background. And essentially what we did is we drew up minimal staffing criteria for each profession. And that was the first, John Dade and I, he led the publication of the first staffing documents for pharmacists in critical care. And then at the same time, I joined the UKCPA critical care group. That was just forming. It was a very, very early days. And myself, Mark Tomlin, Mark Borthwick, sort of had an idea, even in those early days, about, the big hospitals having these critical care pharmacists that have opportunity, and we should be sharing what we do across the critical care community and reaching out to every hospital. And I chaired the critical care group, actually, I think when we just formed it, actually, for a year and a half. I think I was struggling having my third child and work when I gave up to the incredible Mark Borthwick, who did a much better job than me. He was, but actually we did a lot of work on, published a lot of stuff on describing competencies for critical care pharmacists. And a lot of the stuff we were trying to say then was like, we're not all the same. There are very senior pharmacists, there are middle grade pharmacists, and there are junior pharmacists. And you won't get the trained product. Give us time and patience. And actually that fed into the sort of competencies for different areas. And really, the HP group really fed into, I've always loved multi-professional working. You learn so much in other professions, don't you? Fed into that. And at the same time, being a voice for ICU pharmacy and encouraging people to get involved. And I think our work, actually, that we started, that Mark took on and led, Mark Borthwick, really got started. I couldn't take the credit to where they are today, whereas every ICU now has a pharmacist. His last publication, Workforce, said 99.9% of ICUs have an ICU pharmacist in the UK, which is fantastic. And now I'm leading a similar bit of work, which is even more challenging in some ways, for the European Society of Intensive Care Medicine. ICU pharmacy is not as prevalent in Europe. But the intensivists and the rest of the team recognise the expertise. So we've just formed a group hoping to define standards. In fact, we just had a big publication, Intensive Care Medicine, talking about the 10 reasons why you should have an ICU pharmacist. So that's a really exciting thing to do. I think with those things is you've got to use your professional leverage, but you can't want to be the other profession. You can't. Do you know what I mean? You have to be your voice within the team, and I think that's probably what myself and a number of other people have done together. We've always been, let's be the voice in the team. And a lot of the first consultant pharmacists, it was Mark Tomlin. He was the first, wasn't he? Consultant, we're in critical care, So we're very lucky to have that community. And it's very lucky to be one of the early lights in it. I think there are other people that are the leading lights now, but to be part of it at the beginning was really special. It's really nice.
Absolutely.
Very lucky.
And it highlights as well how much opportunity there is within pharmacy as a profession. So if you find a specialty that you love, you're looking at the clinical side in front of the patient on the ward, the multidisciplinary side, you're looking at research, you're looking at education. And when you look at these groups, I love the idea of that collaboration piece and the network and making friendships with people who are on a similar journey, because you really do motivate each other.
Yes.
And engage with each other and learn from each other and help as well. Like, oh, we tried this, in our ICU, and you really kind of get an idea of what's happening on a national scale. And that's really exciting. There's so many great skills that we need to have or we will learn within these roles. And that kind of highlights as well that now I think that there's so much more structure in terms of what is expected of you as a pharmacist. So if you look at the RPS sort of advanced pharmacy framework, it really guides you to understand the basics in terms of the foundation that you need to start with and how you develop it. And you're obviously building this portfolio, but that kind of stuff didn't exist when you were an early careers pharmacist and you had to just figure it out on your own. So that is incredible in terms of your personality and your drive and your determination and thinking outside the box as well, and looking at the kind of innovation piece and saying, well, actually, we're missing this link, or I don't understand why this drug is causing a certain side effect, and I'm going to figure it out. And then launching yourself into a PhD whilst you have, 2 children and then undergoing a pregnancy. I mean, these are just incredible and inspiring elements of your journey. And I'm so happy to have had the opportunity to capture that information on audio and video for people to hear, because, you know, it's really nice to showcase what pharmacists can do. And part of this podcast and building Pharmacist Diaries is to showcase this profession, because I feel like we do not advocate for what we do more than we should.
Yes, I agree.
And, you know, this episode showcases that, is that you can achieve anything that you want if you put your mind to it. You can really overcome anxieties, hurdles, obstacles. You can face challenges and fix them, and it can be done. And you're a great kind of person to have showcased that. So, you know, this is, you know, I really appreciate your time, Cathrine. You've got a lot going on.
It's very nice of you to ask me. It's been an honor to be here, actually. It really has.
Yeah. And there's so much more to come in terms of your journey, your research, the involvement that you have within critical care. And I've been following you recently on LinkedIn, and you've been obviously posting a lot about kind of what's happening with your research and things. So I kind of look forward to seeing what else 2024 brings. And actually, before I close the episode, what have you got planned for 2024 in terms of your pharmacy-specific goals?
Oh, gosh, that's a big question, isn't it? So, and I say this to all my friends, I'm not going to take on, I'm going to start saying no, right? That's a personal goal. I get too enthusiastic and take on far too much. I want to, so last year was all about, I think, so I had a period of ill health, and I think since I come back, I have worked quite hard. So last year was a bit about, it was all about publishing, and publishing in as high impact journals as I could. So I got there. I had 2 intensive care medicine publications. In fact, one was this year. So that was great, really achievement, not just mine. It's always a team. So this year it's about getting some funding, some research funding. And then I want to be, I want to be a chief investigator. I want to do my own research. I want to design and deliver my own research, because I think pharmacy needs that. It needs its own, leaders to encourage the next generation of pharmacy researchers, because I think, it's only having our own researchers that pharmacists believe, because once you get into it, I've got 3 predoctoral fellow pharmacists who are an inspiration every time I speak to them, and they can do it. All the barriers are just in your head. You can do it. You just got to work hard and be patient. So yes, get some funding, get lots of funding, lead my own research, and who knows, lots of other stuff, continue critical illness and work hard.
Watch this space, that's for sure.
Absolutely.
But yeah, thank you so much for your time, and I'm so glad that we've had an opportunity to get to know each other and learn more about your career journey. And I wish you all the best for 2024, because this episode will come out in the end of January. So, we've got multiple months to enjoy and see what happens in Cathrine's space and in critical care.
Thank you so much, Anisha. And you're an absolute inspiration as well. I did happen to know you're a woman to watch.
Oh, thank you.
So lovely to meet you. And
I did get that, yeah.
Yes, I did see that. In fact,
thank you so much.
I might have been on the panel, and you were inspirational. You really were. It was such an awesome thing to read that panel. It really felt that pharmacy was in safe hands, because you were all so much, achieve so much. So well done. Finish on that note. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's a great way to end our podcast on a positive note.
Yeah, absolutely.